Hello. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for joining us in our little teach-a-thon here, this travel festival. And, for all my adult life, I've been living out of a 9 by 22 by 14 inch carry-on the airplane-sized suitcase, traveling around Europe, exploring, learning from my mistakes, taking careful notes, and packaging them in classes like this, and guidebooks, and tours, and TV shows, and so on. And now I just want to take about a half an hour to share with you a little bit about Scotland. So thank you for joining us for that. If you're here in person, thanks for being here. And if you're tuning in online, it's nice to have you taking notes and learning from our experience so you can enjoy maximum travel thrills for every mile, minute, and dollar for your next trip to Scotland. Scotland is a place that just has, people have, all of these almost clichetic images, and in a lot of ways you find them in Scotland when you travel north of England. I was just in Scotland taking one of our tours. For 25 years I led our tours. Now I'm smart enough to know that our local guides can do a better job than I ever could, and I just had a wonderful 10-day trip around Scotland, and I'll be sharing some of that information with you. And this is the route that we took, and if you look at the numbers, that means how many nights we spent, but this is my estimate and my staff's estimate of the best 10 days in Scotland. You would start in Edinburgh, a couple of nights there, go north to St. Andrews, the birthplace of golf, farther north to Kenmore, side trip into Pitlochry. Now we're into the Highlands. The main city in the Highlands is Inverness, near the battlefield of Culloden, the last battle fought on British soil. And then you would cut across the Caledonian Canal, the Loch Ness, famous for the Loch Ness Monster, a lot of British engineering from Telford, and down into Glencoe. And this is the area of the highest mountains in the British Isles and the clan massacres and so on. And then we get to Oban, which is the gateway to the Hebrides Islands, and all of the ferry boats head out from Oban. The most popular side trip from Oban is to go out to the island of Iona, which is the birthplace of Christianity in Scotland. And then from Oban, we can head back to Edinburgh, stopping at Stirling Castle, which along with the Edinburgh Castle are the two greatest castles to see in Scotland, and back to Edinburgh. Not included on this 10-day swing through Scotland is Glasgow, which is just about a 45-minute train ride straight to the west of Edinburgh, and that is a very exciting city to see, and I'll show you some slides about that. When we go to Scotland, our first stop is likely going to be Edinburgh. And Edinburgh is just one of the most entertaining cities in Europe. I just absolutely love it. If all you're going to see in Scotland, if you don't have time for Scotland and you're doing England and you just have time for one city, really consider Edinburgh. You can actually very easily fly in and out of Edinburgh if you want to make it an open jaws flight into London and home from Scotland. When you think of Edinburgh, you've got the medieval city. It started on the rocky bluff where the castle has been since ancient times, and then it goes along the ridge 1 mile downhill to the Abbey, and that's called the Royal Mile. In front of the Royal Mile, below it, was a lake. In modern times, relatively modern times, they drained the lake, and now they brought the train into where the lake once was, and that's sort of the center practical transportation infrastructure hub of Edinburgh. And on the other side, beyond where the lake once stood, you have the modern grid plan city built in the Georgian age, and that's where most of the fancy, elegant architecture is of the more modern city. This is the castle on top of the rocky bluff, and when you go to Edinburgh, you're going to really want to start there, I would say. At the gate, you meet Robert the Bruce and William Wallace, and you get a sense that this is really close to the soul of the Scottish people. You step inside of the castle, and you will be met by a local guide, and they'll take you on a walk. You'll see the Stone of Scone, you'll see the crown jewels, you'll see the old Romanesque church, you'll see the military museum, you'll see the memorial to all the people in Scotland who died, defending the British Empire. And it's just an amazing historic visit, and it really is the single essential stop when you are in Edinburgh. From there, at the esplanade leading up to the castle, you've got a big parking lot, and for much of the summer, it is built up to house the military tattoo. This is the grand massing of the bands with the lone bagpiper. It's an amazing spectacle that happens every summer about the same time as the Edinburgh Festival. You've got the Edinburgh Festival, you've got the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, you've got a lot of other festivals, and you got the Military Tattoo, all happening late in the summer. And it's important if you're traveling in July or August to know when these festivals are, and if you are going to hit it during festival time, it's good news and it's bad news. You got to lay the groundwork, you got to get your accommodations and everything. You're going to pay a premium for your room during this time. But if you like entertainment, you're going to be running like a kid in a candy store from one event to the next. When I was there, it seems like there's more stuff going on. There's more entertainers than there are visitors almost, and they're hungry for people to get tickets to these things in the Fringe Festival. That's the more informal ad lib festival that goes along. And you can see the Military Tattoo, like all of Britain does, on TV if you don't have tickets for the actual event. From the castle, one of the most historic and interesting walks in all of Europe is called the Royal Mile. I absolutely love it. I've been doing it for 30 years. It never gets old. I just tail along with a local guide, and I hear all these romantic, fanciful stories, probably half of them a little bit exaggerated and bogus, but still, it gives you a little inkling of the rich history and the fascinating story of Edinburgh. So follow these guides down the Royal Mile, and it's just an amazing walk past the cathedral, past statues of David Hume, and a reminder of how many great intellectual leaders came out of Scotland, all the way down to the Holyrood Palace, 1 mile below, which anchors the Royal Mile at the bottom. When you go along the Royal Mile, you're going to find a dense population and a reminder that in the Middle Ages, this was the most densely populated city in Europe. It was called Auld Reekie because it smelled so bad. And they had all of these early skyscrapers, the biggest skyscrapers in Europe, right there, and you can see them to this day, and with your guide, they'll bring it to life. And you've got all sorts of literary history because you've got Walter Scott, you've got Robert Burns, you've got Robert Louis Stevenson, you've got all sorts of literary heritage right there. By the way, one of the great things to do in the evening is to take the literary pub crawl. In Edinburgh, they've got one. They've also got one in Dublin. I just love this thing. And you meet a couple of actors who really scramble and hustle and make your evening very entertaining as you go from one pub to the next, to the next, to the next. And it's a very informal, casual, social thing. Lots of great insight to Scottish literature, and more fun as the beer drinking goes on. That is the literary pub crawl in Edinburgh. Along the Royal Mile, you come to Deacon Brodie's Tavern. And Deacon Brodie was the guy who inspired the story Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Robert Louis Stevenson's book. And you've got Deacon Brodie, who was a decent man during the day, and Deacon Brodie, who was a terrible guy after dark. And you'll learn all about that in other stories. The Royal Mile is becoming quite touristic, and it's got all this shortbread and kilts and bagpipes and all the kitschy Scottish stuff, and it just gets a little tiresome. On the other hand, you look past that, and you've got a lot of history, too. Along the walk, you'll come to St. Giles Cathedral. This is the most important church in Scotland, and it's something you really got to check out. It's filled with regalia and pageantry and so on, and history inside. And this is the place where the great reformer John Knox preached the Reformation. In the 16th century, all over Europe, courageous preachers were breaking away from the Roman Catholic Church, and Knox was the guy who led Scotland into this new age of Protestantism. And there are all sorts of interesting things to see and do related to the great reformer John Knox. His house is just across the street, and if you want to see his actual grave, it's there at parking spot number 23 in the parking lot of the church. He was really into austerity, and I guess they took him seriously when it came to his burial spot. I got inspired at his house. They let you dress up and play around with one of those little quill pens, but I'm into great reformers. If you want another dimension of Scottish culture beyond the Reformation, you go further down the Royal Mile and you get to Cadenhead's Malt Whiskey Distillery or whiskey shop. And there's a sort of a touristic ride, sort of a whiskey tasting experience at the top of the Royal Mile. Very, a lot of people say it's like, they call it Malt Disney. It's very commercial, and I just don't like it, frankly. But down at the bottom of the Royal Mile, you drop into this little place, and these guys are evangelical about whiskey, Scottish whiskey, Scotch whiskey, and they will explain to you how whiskey can become a very good friend. And by the way, when we go to pubs in Britain, remember, a pub is a public house, right? That's where you meet people. In all over England, you just kind of go with the local beer. In Scotland, I don't drink whiskey unless I'm in Scotland. It doesn't make sense to me outside of Scotland for some reason. But in Scotland, it is so right. And I go to a pub and I just talk to local people about their favorite whiskey. You know how people always talk about wine? This is kind of fruity, and this is, raspberries or stuff like that. I've never, cinnamon? No, it's just, it's nice red wine, but I don't get any, But when it comes to whiskey, you've got all these little gradations, and they all make sense. It's a beautiful opportunity for anybody that wants to develop a fine taste. So let local people teach you about whiskey as an excuse to make a friend in a pub. And every pub has a long list of whiskeys. They're all Scotch whiskeys, and it really is an interesting experience. I buy a little bottle of whiskey from this guy every time. It comes with a nice cork, and I just have a little nip every night, and it's just part of my Scottish experience. It's just a beautiful way to augment your time in Scotland. At the bottom of the Royal Mile, you've got the new Scottish Parliament building. Now, since 1707 until I think 1999, Scotland's Parliament was in London. And finally, in the last decade or so, London said, okay, you guys can have your parliament back up in Scotland. All over Europe, ethnic regions are getting more autonomy because, Europe is uniting. I mean, you could secede from Britain, but you can't really secede from Europe. And Londons and Parises and Madrids are really realizing they got to give their ethnic groups a little more ability to wave their flags. And consequently, Scotland is feeling its oats, and they've got their own parliament building. It's a beautiful, beautiful building, done with all sorts of Scottish pride. And obviously, you'd have a wonderful tour here, which is a perfect way to learn about the issues the Scottish people are dealing with as they find a nice balance with their partnership with London and their membership in the British Isles. The big news these days is how much autonomy or even out-and-out independence does Scotland want. And if you look in front of their parliament building, like all over Europe, you'll find three flags: the region, the country, and Europe. Here you see the flag of Scotland in the middle, the Union Jack, and the flag of Europe. Maybe in the future the Scottish people will have more independence, more autonomy. It's a very complicated issue for the Scottish people. When you're in Edinburgh, you've got your chance now to see Scottish art. When you're in London, you see British art. In Scotland, you want to really go to the National Gallery. Even if you went to the British Museum, even if you went to the National Gallery down in London, do it Scottish style in Edinburgh before going out into the countryside. You will have a beautiful art gallery right there. It's free, it's gorgeous, and then you can go nearby to the National Portrait Gallery in Edinburgh, and there you get to see a lot of the heroic and sort of patriotic heroes of Scottish culture. Robbie Burns, Bonnie Prince Charlie, you name it, all of these great figures in Scottish culture and history are there. Lots of pageantry when you're up in Scotland, and lots of entertainment in the streets. I reminded you that Edinburgh Festival is a big, formal deal with hard-to-get tickets sometimes, but the real fun is what's called the Fringe Festival that goes at the same time, much more loose and easygoing, lots of tickets available, and it really is a cultural free-for-all. If you see a lot of ladies dressed up in nice hats, maybe the Queen is in town. Whenever the royalty is in town, there's lots of buzz, and they spend a lot of time down at Holyrood House, that abbey I was talking about. All over Scotland, you got a chance to go to traditional restaurants and eat haggis and eat whatever would be traditional local food. And I really love the food in Scotland, and haggis is a very rich sort of they won't tell you exactly what's in it, but it's a lot of guts and that kind of stuff. And it's actually quite good. It's not just a wacky touristic dish. It's really part of the culture, and it's worth giving haggis a good, honest try in a nice restaurant. Okay. Now from Edinburgh, you can get on the train, and there's like 2 trains an hour. It takes 45 minutes, and you're in Glasgow. I just love Glasgow. First time I ever really spent a lot of time in Glasgow was just last year, working on my guidebook, and Glasgow is one of those second cities. All over Europe, I'm kind of into second cities. Antwerp, Marseille, Porto in Portugal, Bilbao in Spain, Liverpool in England, Belfast up in Ireland, and Glasgow in Scotland. Glasgow is a powerhouse of an economic place in the old days, and then with the end of the industrial age and the beginning of whatever you call the next age, all these industrial powerhouses went down. and they became Rust Belt places. But the Rust Belt places are now reinvigorated and really rising up with a vengeance. And you feel that when you go to Glasgow. Glasgow has a very proud shipbuilding heritage. And there was a time when a third of all the ships sailing the sea or something like that were Clyde built on the Clyde River from Glasgow. And they're proud of that. Today, very few ships are still built in the shipyards of Glasgow, but the whole city is this artistic, creative spirit. You've got wonderful big graffiti that is ordained by the city. You've got important buildings that are decorated in a creative, fun-loving, almost edgy kind of way. And even in fancy museums, you've got funny little indications for where the restroom is. It's just all fun in Glasgow, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Now, Glasgow is a rough and tumble working class town, and they're really into football. That means soccer. And you've got two teams. You've got the Rangers, and that would be the Protestant team, and that would be the high class people, if you were to generalize. And you got the Celtic, and that would be the Catholic and the working class people. And it is serious. And when you're going around the streets, you'll find a Ranger shop and you'll find a Celtic shop, just like we've got football shops in our country. And the difference there is, if you go into the Celtic shop wearing red or blue, I believe that's the color of the Rangers, it's physically dangerous for you. You walk into that shop and red and blue don't exist. It's just green everywhere. My guide had a red tie on and he was very nervous to go into that shop. So it's serious stuff. And if you ever wanted to really have quite a memorable experience, try going to a soccer game while you're in Glasgow. Now, there's a lot of museums that keep alive the old days of the industrial age. And one of the most fascinating is the tenement house. And this is just a time warp house in a cheap little apartment flat from a woman who lived there in the 1920s or something like that and never changed anything. And today, her children have opened up to the public, and you can walk in, and it's a trip back in time. That's something worth checking out. The cathedral in Glasgow is interesting. Next to the cathedral, you've got a place called the Necropolis, which is a very romantic and evocative City of the Dead, Necropolis. It's a cemetery for Scotland. You've got an amazing museum there called the Kelvingrove Museum and Art Gallery. And stepping in here, it's probably the single most important art gallery and historical museum that you'd see in Glasgow. Fascinating art, beautiful romantic art, which I think is nice to see before heading out into the countryside, and art that shows off what the Scottish people have gone through. When you're in Glasgow, you'll find half of the tourists are there for one reason: Charles Rainey Mackintosh. He is the Art Nouveau architect that put Edinburgh on the artistic map. And you can find his art in the different museums, and if you really want to see his art in action, you go to the Glasgow School of Art. He designed that building, and you can take tours of it, and you can also go to tea houses around town that he designed. But if you're into Art Nouveau, and if you want to see the most famous architect in that era for Scotland, you definitely want Charles Rainey Mackintosh while you are in Glasgow. I was just in Scotland this last year with one of our tours, and as I mentioned, for 25 years I led our tours. For the last 10 years, I've let my guides do the work, and every year I sign up for one of my tours. I do it with a pseudonym. I just do it from home on the computer. It's kind of fun. I end up getting letters from myself, and then I just surprise the group over there. And it's always a lot of fun. Last year I did Scotland. This is part of my Scotland group. A year before I did Turkey. Before that I did Village, Italy. Next year I'm going to do the Best of Europe and the Best of Europe to the big grand 3-week big hits tour of Europe. But we went off on, what you're going to see now are just some slides from the route that our Scottish guides figure is the best. And I just thought it was a wonderful itinerary, and you can use our itinerary to do it on your own. That's the point here. If you're not going to take our tour, use that information, rent a car, and you can do a lot of it easily on your own. St. Andrews is just the first stop north of Edinburgh, and that is famous as the place where golf was born. And golf enthusiasts make a pilgrimage to St. Andrews. St. Andrews has this amazing golf course, and also you've got a ruined cathedral there, the St. Andrews Cathedral. By the way, I didn't golf in St. Andrews, and I'm not a golfer at all, but I did love to do these pitch and putt ranges at various countryside mansions around Scotland, all over England. You don't want little mini golf, it's pitch and putt, and it's really beautiful, and it's a good experience, and it's very affordable. So anybody can spend a few hours on a pitch and putt range as they're traveling around Scotland. The Highlands are the whole area farther north. We stay in a little town called Kenmore. There's a lot of nondescript little towns that just have a special charm. This is called a crannog. And a crannog is a fortified prehistoric house that's built in the lake so nobody could get to it. And it could be 3,000 or 4,000 years old, and they've got one right by Kenmore, and you'll find these all over the place, but this is one that's turned into an amazing museum with people passionate about sharing how people lived back in the Bronze Age. And they would make fire just by rubbing sticks, that kind of thing, and they'd show all sorts of industrious and clever ways that people lived way back then. Many times when I've been traveling around Scotland, there is a clan gathering going on, one of these big games, clan games. You don't need to go to the famous clan games that are advertised all over the world that people jet into. Just be on the ball, and if there's a clan gathering anywhere, drop what you're doing and go there. The smaller, the better. I've enjoyed most the little small town hokey clan gatherings where you've just got the kids running, the kids dancing, the fell runners. It's just the most charming, fun-loving, beautiful family values kind of thing, and it's a perfect insight into a beautiful culture. Find a clan gathering if you can. You got the serious dancers, and then you've got the little girls that someday will be serious dancers that are trying just as hard. And it's just, you got your bagpipers. In the morning, the fell runners take off, and fell running is cross-country running through the open fields, and they run all the way up to the neighboring mountaintop and back, cross-country, leaping through the holes and everything, just like broken ankle waiting to happen, but they just all take off. You got the guys tossing the caber, you've got bagpipe parades, you've got beer in the tent being served to everybody, and it's just a beautiful scene. Find a clan gathering and enjoy it if you can. Also a fun thing to do, and we do this with our tour, is to stop at a sheep farm, and a lot of these, not a lot, but a few of these are around, and they can, we listed in our guidebooks, and you get to meet the sheep farmer, and you get to hear what it's like in his life and what his struggles are these days, and he will let the dogs do their thing, and these dogs are incredible. I was just filming, by the way, in the Lakes District, south of the border in England, and we happened upon a dog show, and it was just a countryside dog show, and all these sheep herders are out there with their competing dogs, and you can find this anywhere if you're just heads up as you're driving around, and they'll whistle and they'll holler, and a certain kind of whistle makes the dog go to the left or to the right or bring them in or whatever, and these dogs really are the masters of the sheep, and it's fun to see them out there working. And we get to shear the sheep, and we get to learn a lot about that culture. We were there when the little puppies were just born, and I'm really not much of a person for like, oh, isn't it a cute dog, but I fell in love with this dog. I wanted to take him away. It was so cute. Their eyes weren't even open yet. They were just adorable, and they will grow up to brutalize those sheep someday themselves. Farther north, we get to Inverness, and Inverness is the major city up in the north of Scotland, and it's kind of a nondescript, hard-scrabble town with some interesting history that just comes to life when you can follow a local guide around. I just met this guy, his name's Cameron, and he's just entertaining, and for $10, he'll take you around and give you a 1-hour walk through the town. Every night, 6 o'clock, Cameron does his Inverness history walk. Anytime you're traveling, if you can find a local person like that that's going to give you a walk, it's a public walk, so you're sharing the cost with whoever shows up. Be on the ball about that kind of stuff. Google, go to TripAdvisor, use your guidebook, ask at the tourist office, ask at your hotel, whatever, find out where these things are. Now, we were out running around the town, and our guide, Liz, realized one of her favorite folk bands was playing at the next hotel. And we were all going to all the bars in town famous for folk music because we wanted to see folk music. So our guide ran around town physically and found us all and said, the best music's over here next to our hotel. But the point is, you got to be able to turn on a dime and go to the hotel that's got the good music tonight. But it was brilliant. And it was a local thing, not tourist. It was locals there. And it was just incredible music, incredible dancing, incredible conviviality, and wonderful beer. Anybody can have that every night when they're up in Scotland if they're just on the ball. Outside of Inverness is Culloden, and this is the site of the last battle fought on British soil, 1746. And this was the last great Scottish hurrah. Bonnie Prince Charlie wanted to take over the throne in London, and you can walk around that field with a local guide and learn the romantic story of Bonnie Prince Charlie and the Catholic forces of Scotland trying to move down to London. And here, Bonnie Prince Charlie and his Highlanders met the Redcoats, and they were just completely slaughtered. And Bonnie Prince Charlie said, "Every man for himself," and he took off. The clans were scattered. Nobody could wear kilts anymore. Nobody could play the bagpipes anymore. And that was the end of Scottish culture until later on in the Victorian age, Robert Burns and Queen Victoria and other people recognized the beauty of Scottish culture, and it rose again, and you have this sort of tartan stuff going on. But Culloden is a very evocative place, and when you go to Inverness, the first stop outside, I would say, is the battlefield of Culloden. There's a thing called Clavacarns, and it's like Stonehenge age. It's about 4,000, 5,000 years old, and it's a stone circle way up there in Scotland. The point is, all over the British Isles, if you know where to look, you can find these evocative stone reminders that people were doing some impressive stuff here back when the Egyptians were making the pyramids. I remember our guide put together at the Clavacarns just a kind of a Scottish tasting event. And remember, it's just a reminder for me to remind you, when you're in Scotland, make a point to try the local soft drink, try the local cheeses, try the shortbread, go to the grocery store and pick up what you like, and be sure to check it out. Around the Scottish countryside, you've got manor houses and palaces of the older aristocracy, like Cawdor Castle, and these are well worth checking out in your planning. Remember, the English had to assert their control over Scotland by building roads so they could get their forces in and out. Anybody who wants to effectively control another country has to have the infrastructure so they can take advantage of their military superiority. So they would send their British engineers up there. Thomas Telford made all sorts of roads and canals and so on. And then when Scotland was well under the realm of England, they built a canal all across Scotland. It's called the Caledonian Canal. And it saved the ships the trouble of having to go all the way around the land, John O'Groats up in the top, and they could just cut across this way. When you look at the map of Scotland, you can see there's a fissure across Scotland, and it's a series of lakes. Loch Ness is the most famous, going from Inverness all the way southwest. Half of that stretch, it seems like, is Loch Ness, the other lakes, and then they built canals connecting all those lakes. It's an amazing engineering feat, and these canals only were a little window, just a couple decades before the trains came in and antiquated the canals, and they were no longer such a big help. Today they're more recreational. Along Loch Ness, you'll find a great castle, Urquhart Castle, very popular because it's the best viewing point from here to see the Loch Ness Monster. And all along here, you got this Loch Ness Monster lore, which gets a little tiresome, but people travel here from all over the world to see if they can find that guy. This is an example of those canals I was mentioning. Telford built these canals, and these canals are great examples of the industrial age cutting across Scotland. I find the canals up there quite charming to just have a picnic or something and imagine what it was like when they were built. The highest mountains in the British Isles are in Scotland, and the most evocative countryside, I think, is in Scotland. And Glencoe is famous as the place of the Weeping Glen, where the Campbells, working with the Redcoats, accepted the hospitality of the MacDonald clan and then killed them all while they were sleeping. And to this day, it's called the Weeping Glen, but there's some very, very tragic stories about the British corrupting some clans to get back at the other clans who they had a long-standing grudge with, and it was just quite a mess. To this day, you'll hear stories about the MacDonalds and the Campbells. When you're driving around the Highlands, you just got to make a point to stop the car or stop the bus and get out and hike and walk and feel the wind and just be in the desolate expanses of the Highlands. Take little hikes. Any guidebook explains good hikes to take. You'll see bagpipers standing on the roadside. You'll find hairy cows, hairy coo they're called. You'll find beautiful views of castles. All of that is just part of the charm of traveling through the Scottish Highlands. I mentioned Oban is the main port on the west coast, and this is the end of the train line and the springboard for all of the ferries. Oban is a beautiful town in its own right. It became quite important when the train came there, and it provides that sort of terminus service, and today Oban has its own charm, and from there you got the Caledonian MacBrayne ferry services that go through the islands, connecting all the Hebrides. The most important single trip to make from Oban is across the Isle of Mull to the island of Iona, I-O-N-A. And Iona is famous because 1,500 years ago, Christianity came from Ireland to Scotland via Iona. And it's been a spiritual place ever since. Regardless, even if you're not thinking in like Christian terms, it's a spiritual place. There's something about Iona that really has a special quality, and it really is a neat place to go. I just love going to Iona and getting into all the medieval mysticism of the place and the birth of Christianity in Scotland up there, and just walking and feeling the great outdoors. Heading back to Edinburgh, your last stop might be Stirling Castle. It's a great castle, and it's a castle that really welcomes the public in a very good way. And then it is back to Edinburgh. So you can see there's lots to do in Scotland, and I want to remind you, when you do get to Britain, it's quite easy to make an open jaws trip, flying into London, do Britain, and then do that whole Scottish loop I talked about, and you can fly home easily from Edinburgh. One way or another, I hope this has been helpful, and I want to thank you very much for attending, and happy travels. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye now.